A shocking development in the Jim Harbaugh suspension story at Michigan with the Big Ten. We have some details for you, and I have some thoughts on the matter. All that right here on a special edition of Locked On Big Ten.
You are Locked On Big Ten, your daily podcast on the Big Ten Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Big Ten. I'm Craig Shemon. Thank you for making us your first listen each and every day. We really appreciate the everydayers out there. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnCollege and use the code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. Daily fantasy sports made easy. So it appears that Harbaugh and Michigan, they back down. Why? We're going to look into that, plus our weekend preview as well. Be sure to subscribe down below and follow Locked On Big Ten for free wherever you get your podcast. That way you'll get the latest episode of this podcast as soon as it becomes available each and every day. So the Jim Harbaugh story took a strange twist again on Thursday. In fact, it's easy to lose track. There are so many side stories going on with this story. The Michigan football coach will continue to serve the remainder of his 3-game suspension set forth by the Big Ten. The school says it has resolved its lawsuit with the Big Ten, and the Big Ten has agreed to close its investigation into Spygate. What? What happened? This is bizarre. As you know, Harbaugh started serving a 3-game suspension handed down by the Big Ten last week for the school's alleged involvement in the elaborate spy-sign-stealing scandal centered around Michigan assistant Connor Stalions. All right? That's all anybody's been talking about for a couple of weeks. Now, Harbaugh has claimed that he knew nothing about the operation, nor did he direct anybody to break any NCAA rules. Actually, Connor Stalions backed up Harbaugh's story on that part of it. Plus, according to a Yahoo Sports report a while back, about a week ago, the NCAA has admitted it can find no connection to Harbaugh and its investigation here. So where are we? Well, that's where Big Ten Commissioner Tony Petitti stepped in, of course, and he ended up giving Harbaugh a suspension. And Michigan feels like it was without due process, right? According to Michigan, that's what they say anyway. But Petitti and the Big Ten, they said, look, something happened here. The NCAA is taking too long. So under our sportsmanship clause, Jim Harbaugh, you're the head guy. So you're suspended for the remaining 3 games of the season. And we should point out, the Big Ten, like the NCAA, also confirmed it could not connect Harbaugh to the scandal, but somebody had to pay. He's the top guy. He's the guy, right? Well, that's where Michigan stepped in and Jim Harbaugh stepped in. Vigorous attempts, of course, to get an immediate injunction that will allow Harbaugh to remain on the sideline, particularly last week against Penn State. And remember, this is all going down while the team was flying to Penn State. That's when they found out about it. And they failed at getting that injunction. And so he sat in the team hotel about 20 minutes away from Beaver Stadium while his team won the football game. They did, however, get a court date. And it was, of course, supposed to be for Friday, November 17th at 9 a.m. with Washtenaw County Circuit Court Judge Timothy Connors. By the way, for those of you that don't know, that's where Ann Arbor is located, if you're not familiar with that area. So Harbaugh had even hoped to speak in his defense at that hearing. Was really looking forward to it. Michigan was putting together a big case, and the hope for Michigan was to have Judge Connors throw out the appealed suspension while the school's lawsuit against the Big Ten continued. And Harbaugh would be back on the sideline for Saturday's game against Maryland. And, of course, that's where the Wolverines will be looking to notch their 1,000th win in the entire history of the school. Pretty big day. And, of course, also for next weekend's game against rival Ohio State. Also a very big game. Well, that Friday hearing never happened, right? Off the docket. In a shocking turn of events, Michigan and Jim Harbaugh agreed to serve the remaining 2 games of this 3-game suspension. And in an equally shocking turn of events, the Big Ten will close its investigation into Harbaugh and Spygate. What? Also, Michigan says it's done with the lawsuit against the Big Ten. This whole thing's done. It's over. Well, almost over. The NCAA is still investigating the Spygate matter. That's still going on. That's always been a separate issue. So what happened here? It's like this is an episode of Suits, like Harvey Specter and Mike Ross just put the leverage squeeze on people behind the scenes the day before the big case. This is a Hollywood script. It's incredible. But I refuse to be naive enough to believe that both sides just quietly backed off for the good of the conference, for the good of the school, for the good of the players. I mean, do you believe any of that? I mean, did either side find something that neither side wanted made public? Was there a smoking gun? Look, I know the bulk of Michigan's defense here was to point out how other schools like Ohio State, Rutgers, and Purdue were stealing Michigan signs. That was going to be a big deal about all this. And I'm just curious how deep that storyline went. You know, was that all going to come out in the hearing on Friday's hearing? I don't know. Did both sides decide they didn't want that stuff out there? Did Michigan want the Big Ten to stop poking around? The school is currently under 2 NCAA investigations and an FBI investigation. Maybe the Big Ten investigation was just too much. It was just too much. Again, maybe there was a smoking gun here. Maybe a connection to Connor Stallions from somebody. I don't know. Did Michigan find something like that? Did the Big Ten find something? Did Michigan find something and decide to self-report and say, look, all right, here's the deal. We'll take the 3-game suspension. You drop all this nonsense and we just move on. Did that happen? It seems like a conversation, something along those lines happened, but we don't know what. And by the way, Locked On Big Ten right here, we were one of the first places to suggest that Connor Stallions was a rogue employee at Michigan, and maybe Jim Harbaugh really didn't know what was going on. A lot of you rip me on the comment. A lot of you Buckeye fans, I should say, rip me for saying as much. But both the NCAA and the Big Ten have said there is no evidence connecting Jim Harbaugh to any of this. Anybody want to apologize to me? Anybody? It's all right. It's all part of the deal. Anyway, a lot of interesting stuff is going on, and would like your opinion on it at Talk Big Ten, number 10 on Twitter or X, or here on YouTube, if that's where you're checking this out. Your comments are always welcome for all of that. And a couple of notes at halftime of the Nebraska-Wisconsin game. Locked On Big Ten is going to go live. You know, we've been doing that on Saturdays at different times. Sometimes we do it earlier, sometimes later at night. We're going to do it at halftime of that 7:30 game on NBC with Nebraska and Wisconsin. So what does all of this mean moving forward for Michigan? Still some stuff to talk about. It's all in 1 minute right here on Locked On Big Ten. Prize Picks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. It's just you against the numbers. You pick some players, anywhere from 2 to 6 players. You pick some stats, and you say more than those stats or less than those stats combined. All right. I'll give you an example, because now you can combine football players and basketball players. For example, let's take 2 players. Let's say you take Steph Curry. Well, let's not do Steph Curry. How about LeBron James? You take LeBron James in tomorrow night's game, more than 20 points, and pair it with Justin Fields, who's going to play for the Bears this weekend against the Lions. He's been out for a while, and say more than 1 rushing touchdown. And if both of those come up, you win. It's really that easy, and it's that fun. Been doing it for football season, bankroll in the basketball season. We're ready to go. So it's real easy. Go to prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege and use the code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, go to prizepicks.com/lockedoncollege and use the code LockedOnCollege for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy. And Athletic Brewing Company. Have you heard this? Have you tried this? This is fantastic. It's time for our Game Changer of the Week, brought to you by Athletic Brewing Company. We're going to make the game changer Jim Harbaugh. Whether he's coaching or not, he's He's changing things. He's changing the way things are done. He didn't even coach half the season. Anyway, Athletic Brewing has completely changed the non-alcoholic beer game. They make non-alcoholic beers that actually taste good. In fact, I have some right here. Always have some nearby. There we go. And it is everywhere. As they just changed the whole beer industry. They're fit for all times. You can drink them anytime, anywhere, make any activity more enjoyable, like watching the big game, or you can watch your kids' game. Again, non-alcoholic, right? Even a workout, working around in the yard, no hangovers, no alcohol. You can find Athletic in stores, online, and at bars around the country. What you need to do, so you can find them at a store near you, or I did it online at athleticbrewing.com, although I've seen it at a store across the street here recently. First-time customers can use the code Locked On to get 15% off your first online order. That's Locked On, LOCKEDON, at checkout for 15% off at athleticbrewing.com. Near beer, exclusions and conditions apply. Athletic Brewing Company, fit for all times. All right, so I want to take just a second here to thank you. I always like to thank you guys. Never take anything for granted. Always appreciate it. This Locked On Big Ten channel has been growing like crazy, thanks to you. Thank you for making Locked On Big Ten your first listen each and every day, especially you everydayers out there. Meanwhile, be sure to subscribe down below real quick if you could. It's free, it's easy, it's simple, it's fast. Here on YouTube, and share and follow and like Locked On Big Ten, your team every day. So the Michigan football team going to travel to Maryland, going to take on the Terps without Jim Harbaugh, and offensive coordinator Sharon Moore will once again be the acting head coach for the Wolverines, just like at Penn State last week. Michigan has been laser focused through this whole process. Remember, we did this before. Harbaugh was suspended the first 3 games of the season for another matter. And now he'll close out the season suspended for 3 games. They just keep moving on. They are laser focused on the job at hand. With all this noise going on, can they continue to run the table and avoid the noise? Or will they crack one week? You never know. They look pretty strong every time we see them. As for the Terps, there's some talent there. Talia Tagovailoa, a really good quarterback. This team won its first 5 games, but they dropped the next 4 before pulling off a last-second win last week at Nebraska. And look, I don't think there's such thing as a good spot in the Michigan schedule, but being sandwiched in between a big Penn State game last week on the road and a big game against Ohio State without your head coach, I think for Maryland, that's a good spot to be in. Maybe an overlook week, maybe something, anything. We'll see. Probably not. Moving forward, though, the Wolverines, then they host Ohio State next week, the big game, and Harbaugh won't be there. But if they win, they will be in the Big Ten championship. Harbaugh is allowed to be in that game. So once this regular season is over, this weekend and next, Harbaugh will be allowed to come back to the sideline. He can coach a Big Ten championship game if they are in it. He can coach a bowl game if they're in it. He can coach the playoffs if he is in it, if Michigan is in it. So we'll see if they stay laser focused. I think Ohio State's playing some of the best football they've been playing all season. That game is going to be crazy. It's going to be a great game. But and by the way, if Michigan does beat Ohio State and go to the Big Ten championship game and then win that game, how awkward is that photo op going to be when Commissioner Tony Petitti is handing him the Big Ten trophy, Jim Harbaugh the trophy? That's going to be a picture-worthy moment. Yeah, we'll probably plaster it all over this particular podcast as well. But anyway, that's what's going on with Michigan. There are other games going on. We actually did 2 podcasts for today. We initially had planned to do one on the Chase in the West and Iowa and everybody else out there. And we did it. It's still out there. You can still find it. We could just go back. These podcasts are right next to each other. So make sure you check that out. Of course, at Michigan and Maryland, they're at noon Eastern on Fox. There's the Rutgers game at Penn State on FS1. You know, a few weeks ago, Penn State lost to Ohio State, and then they barely beat Indiana. It was a hangover game the next week. And I'm wondering if the same thing's going to happen. They lost to Michigan last week. Now is Penn State what are they going to do against Rutgers? Is that going to be a closer game than people think? Plus, James Franklin fired his offensive coordinator, Mike Yurcich, and after the loss, and he's the scapegoat here. I don't know if that's the problem, but he's the scapegoat. And running backs coach Jawan Cedar and tight ends coach Ty Hall will be the co-offensive coordinators. Cedar will be on the sideline. Hall will be up in the booth upstairs. So keep an eye on that situation at Penn State. Also, the Iowa Hawkeyes are at Illinois. And if the Hawkeyes win, they will be the Big Ten West champions and will play in the Big Ten championship game. Got to do it without Cooper DeJean. Bad news for the Hawkeyes in practice on Wednesday. Lower leg injury. He's the most exciting player they have. So that's sad for the Hawkeyes. But they keep finding ways to win. They're 8-2. They've had a lot of injuries at their starting positions. Purdue is at Northwestern, and the Wildcats, believe it or not, are 1 win away from bowl eligibility. So they only won 1 game last year. So give head coach David Braun the permanent job. They did. They took the interim tag off. They offered it to him. He's now the official head coach. That's a good move by Northwestern. And congratulations to David Braun there. Michigan State is at Indiana on the Big Ten Network. Both teams there desperately need a win. They're both sitting at 3-7. And the Minnesota Golden Gophers, they head to Ohio State, 4 o'clock Eastern kickoff on the Big Ten Network. And the Buckeyes, of course, dropped from number 1 to number 2 in the college football playoff poll. I had some theories about that. That's 2 podcasts ago, if you want to go back and check it out on Locked On Big Ten. But honestly, the Buckeyes are playing some awesome football right now, and their defense is a little banged up, but they seem to be peaking at the right time, in time for next week's game, the showdown down in Ann Arbor. And, of course, Nebraska is at Wisconsin. That's the NBC game, 7:30 Eastern time, the nationally televised game for the Big Ten. And another quick reminder that Locked On Big Ten will go live during that game at halftime. Okay? So hope to see you there. We've had a lot of you check us out. We take live comments, live reaction, my reaction to the day. If there's anything new on Jim Harbaugh, we will be all over it. And there's games going on. So we'll talk about the games and everything going on the football field as well. Many ways between now and then to interact with me. You can hit me up at Twitter, the X at TalkBig10 10. Don't forget our website, talkbig10.com with the number 10. And also here on YouTube, take comments all the time. I probably got more comments this last week and a half than I have the last month combined. It's been incredible. You guys are incredible. Thank you. If you haven't yet, you everydayers or not, if you're new, just finding us, subscribe down below real quick. It does us a great favor if you do that. Just subscribe. It's free, and that gets you in our Big Ten club, if you will. And you can follow this podcast right now on your favorite podcast app. You get the latest episode of Locked On Big Ten as soon as it becomes available each and every day. Also, if that's not enough, Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, Locked On Sports Today. It is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every single league. So go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe there as well. It's the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. It has been a big day. Wanted to jump in with this extra podcast here before the news got away from anybody. Little bonus podcast today on the Harbaugh situation. Thank you for tuning in on a breaking news story. And we'll check you out tomorrow, the weekend. And until then, I thank you for checking us out. I'm Craig Shemon for Locked On Big Ten.